Summary of Psalms 55 to 60 NLT. Psalm 55. David expresses deep distress over the betrayal of a close friend and the resulting turmoil. He feels overwhelmed by his enemies and prays for God's intervention. David asks God to deal with the wicked and deliver him from his enemies, placing his trust in God's faithfulness. The psalm ends with an assurance that God will take care of those who trust in him, while the wicked will face their downfall. Psalm 56. This psalm is a prayer of trust and lament, written by David when he was captured by the Philistines in Gath. He cries out to God for help, expressing his fear, but also his faith in God's protection. David affirms that God has counted his terrors and will deliver him from his enemies. He vows to thank and praise God for his faithfulness and deliverance. Psalm 57. David writes this psalm while hiding in a cave, seeking refuge from Saul. He calls on God for mercy and protection, declaring his trust in God's faithfulness despite his difficult circumstances. David promises to praise God among the nations and expresses confidence that God will deliver him from his enemies. The psalm ends with a declaration of praise to God's steadfast love and faithfulness. Psalm 58. In this psalm, David condemns the wicked rulers and judges who unjustly oppress others. He calls for God's judgment upon them, praying that they will face the consequences of their corruption. The psalmist expresses confidence that the righteous will ultimately see God's justice prevail. It concludes with the assurance that God will bring justice and that the righteous will rejoice in his judgment. Psalm 59. This is another psalm of David written when Saul sent men to watch his house and kill him. David calls on God for protection from his enemies, describing his attackers as violent and treacherous. He asks God to intervene and punish the wicked, while promising to sing of God's strength and love when he delivers him. The psalm ends with a declaration of praise to God as a refuge and strength. Psalm 60. This psalm is a prayer of lament and a plea for God's help during a military defeat. David acknowledges that God has allowed the Israelites to suffer defeat, but asks for his mercy and intervention to restore them. He expresses confidence that with God's help, they will be victorious over their enemies. The psalm ends with a declaration of trust in God's ability to lead Israel to victory and deliverance. These psalms reflect themes of lament, trust in God's protection, and prayers for justice, as David calls out to God in times of distress and challenges. They emphasize God's faithfulness, power, and the assurance that he will ultimately